So I said, my name's Mark Emery. I've been working at Thrive now for around about 11 years. I started working at Battersea Park, doing volunteering work. Previous to that, I was a maintenance gardener, and I also volunteered with Samaritans. So I sort of put the two things together, and having got my Access Level 2, thought about how gardening had benefited me when I first started it, and so I thought actually I want to sort of help other people using gardening in their lives as well. Heard about Thrive, and so immediately got in touch and got involved with that. I work with a broad range of groups. I work with people with learning disabilities, physical disabilities and mental health, as well as doing outreach programs in schools and residential homes and homeless shelters as well. So I've got a sort of really broad idea of just how much Thrive could do. I think one of the individuals who started Thrive had this idea that anywhere with a green space or anywhere where gardening could be accessed could be of use to people. So this idea of wherever we can find any sort of gardening activity, we can find the benefits of them there. So this is Thrive, what we do. So say I was based at Battersea. Our main head offices are at Trunkwell in Reading. And then we've also got a new project sort of started up in Birmingham more recently. Reading is, as I say, where our main offices are. We've also got, it's more catered towards people with learning disabilities. We've got a sort of broad range of different sort of garden sites there. We've got allotments for growing vegetables, which you can sell to the public. The gardeners have their own metre squared gardens as well. They can work in and decorate, and they can sort of make them how they want them to be and have sort of a say in how all those beds are designed themselves. One of the issues there that might think about ownership, but actually what the groups do is meet up in the morning, have a discussion, and then move around each of the beds as a team, working together, doing them up. We've also got show gardens where we can sort of have gardens which are specifically designed for people with sight impairments or young children and such. So a sight impairment garden, lots of sounds to hear, wind chimes, things like water features so that people can navigate the area, lots of yellow flowers as well, lots of sort of sensory interest with sort of leaves and stuff to touch so that people with sight impairments can still benefit from that site, as well as trying to sort of show other people what gardening can provide through a range of disabilities. Battersea Park in London, which I visited the other day, again, lots of different garden sites. We've got a winter garden where we do qualifications so we can move people into vocational work through that. We've also got the Old English Garden, which is a sort of herbaceous perennial, lots of summer interest, and sort of gardens for people with learning disabilities and growing vegetables, and lots of seed sowing and potting on. And then so we've got Birmingham, where we work with lots of school kids as well as ex-service personnel as well. And we've got a site there as well. All these gardens are open to the public if you ever sort of wanted to come and visit. Another arm of Thrive that I'm involved in is the information service, where we've recently set up the Get Gardening website. I think that was actually launched just earlier at the end of last year. And we've recently had an article which we did for carers specifically, which we got feedback or sort of got input from Carers UK. So hopefully if you go on there, you'll be able to see that and sort of see what advice we can give through our website, as well as sort of different advice for wheelchair users and so people with a wide range of disabilities. The main thing about the information service was this idea again of accessibility, making sure that lots of people could get access to gardening tasks. And it's not just thinking about physically, so people being able to do seed sowing who might have problems with fine motor skills, but sometimes it's the idea of emotionally as well. An example of this might be, we thought about doing a compost bin. And as usual, when we think about doing compost bins, one of the first things that came to mind was this idea of getting old pallets and sort of setting them up to create an area where you could put your garden waste and leaves and such like that. But somebody who perhaps had mental ill health or felt less physically capable might struggle with that idea. Even the idea of where to find pallets might make someone feel quite overwhelmed. So instead we came up with the idea, instead of getting bamboo poles, attaching chicken wire, creating a circle, with the 2 bamboo poles, the chicken wire, driving them into the ground so you can have somewhere to put your leaves that will generally rot down and aren't as heavy and don't require you sort of drive massive stakes in with a mallet and stuff like that. So again, it's this idea of accessibility to what we're doing, cognitive accessibility as well, where we can sort of break tasks down and make them simple. We can sometimes see gardening as being sort of complex or needing certain steps to be done. And one of the things we're keen to do is actually seeing that gardening can be achieved by lots of people in different environments. And actually, as a sort of activity, gardening is remarkably forgiving. I'll often think about garden space and sort of think to myself, what do you have to do to really ruin a garden space? And I think it would involve paraffin and match. Most things, if you get wrong, will come back given time, or we can learn from our mistakes very easily. And so perhaps, replant, put something else in that place as well. We want to sort of view gardening as being a journey with no real end, but a garden space as being somewhere that develops and you learn and sort of over time sort of changes and also reflects you and your personality as well. We've also got the training, education and consultancy arm. That's me, or where I work. So again, we run diplomas and we sort of talk to lots of people working in social therapeutic horticulture projects and sort of talk about what we do, much as I'm talking to you today. And again, lots of the time that's about validating what people are already doing. So lots of people already, as yourselves, will know what the benefits of gardening are, but it's up to us to sort of demonstrate the theory and what it is that sort of helps gardening or helps people through horticulture. All making sense so far? Brilliant, I'm seeing some nodding. Thank you very much, Margaret. First of all, let's look at the 5 benefits to gardening. So first of all, we have the physical benefits. And when we think about physical benefits, we might muse that it might be that physical activity of digging perhaps, or of sort of taking cuttings and stuff. So we've got that very physical activity using gross motor skills, but also it might be, as I said earlier, seed sowing, potting on, perhaps even just deadheading, finding dead flowers and picking them off with your hands as you go along doing that. And we can sort of see that physical activity involved in that. Lots of our gardeners as well enjoy just working out frustration. In some of our gardens, we do have sort of spaces of soil where people can just go and get a mattock or a spade and just go and dig over an area. Or sort of a compost bin's another great one for digging something over and sort of getting physically exhausted through it. When I first started gardening myself, I sort of saw that I had friends who used to go to the gym and talked about that sort of that burn they got from physical exercise and how that felt good to them. I never really understood it. But when I started gardening, I did feel like I had achieved something. So I could sort of go and do something physically and expend myself physically and then look back and actually get a result of a turned over compost bin or a bed that was ready for planting the next year with sort of freshly laid mulch and such like that. As well as sometimes for sort of gardeners, it's not sort of that overtly physical work, but sometimes perhaps just going for a walk around the garden, that time to muse to themselves about what's going on in their lives while having that sort of light physical exercise of walking around the space. We can see the psychological benefits as well in that how it improves or how it can improve mental health. Again, that idea of reflection, seeing seasonal change, and perhaps maybe even sort of seeing metaphors in gardens as well. It might be through weeding that someone can reflect on perhaps where they see themselves in life in comparison to other plants or people, or perhaps they might view their sort of their social standing as well. And if they think maybe there are friends that they're sort of struggling with, they can see the weeds as they sort of go on and sort of imagine a life moving on and finding a sort of different social circle to be in. That brings us nicely on to, again, the social benefits of gardening. And again, at Thrive, we really sort of try and make sure we have groups working together and really sort of try and implement that social benefit to being together. Again, lots of our gardeners might be there because they've had sort of similar issues through their life, and they can have sort of shared experiences with other people from groups, whether that's sort of mental health, being in prison, or going through recovery through something. But they have a sort of a group of people who perhaps understand them better than others would, which is really important. As well as making sure that while some people do come for that social engagement, other people might be less comfortable with that. Other people might just want to have a space to go and sit and be by themselves and reflect. And both of these are good things. And again, sort of reflecting on my own time as a gardener, I know that there were times when I did want to work with others. I wanted to really enjoy that teamwork, everyone getting together to work towards a common goal and getting a lot done. But other times when I actually just wanted to take myself away and go and do something quite methodical where I could just focus in on one particular task. So gardening has a broad range of how we can engage in it socially as well. Yeah, and then with that social as well, they're sort of reaching out to other people, perhaps doing crop swaps. I think I had a sort of a text from one of my neighbours today saying they were taking cuttings from their fig tree, and would I like some fig cuttings for the future? So we can sort of, again, we can reach out, we can start to sort of give people things and share our experience of gardening with others. We've also got learning. Gardening is a very broad subject, and I'm very careful when teaching people about gardening tips to know that it's not just my advice that counts, if that makes sense. There's lots of ways to do different tasks and such. And I think one of the things we try and see is, learning from others, learning different tips. And I think, as gardeners, we're very happy to share our knowledge, aren't we? We're very happy to sort of find out what other people do, how other things work, and we're sort of constantly learning through that. And I think through that learning as well, there is a sense of wonderment that gardening can provide. This sense of sometimes the gardening tasks make us feel very small, but sort of finding out perhaps that taking a cutting from a leaf, sticking that in some compost, and we will get a new plant growing. And there's also learning about ourselves and learning about others as we do things. There's this idea as well that sometimes when gardening, we're not working face to face with people, we're instead working side by side. And so it is if you're working with somebody doing weeding with your sort of head in the sort of bed, that they might start sharing things with you. They might feel that's a time where they feel comfortable to talk about what's going on in their lives. Same as when apparently if you want to talk to teenagers, going for a car journey is a good way to have someone open up to you, because it's not that sort of eye-to-eye contact. Someone working side by side might feel more comfortable sort of talking through what issues are going on in that certain scenario. And lastly, but perhaps one of the most importantly, is that access to the environment. And we talked about that sense of wonderment that nature can provide us with, that seasonal change, what's happening. And I think over the last few days, we've seen a really good example of how sort of that the longer nights and the sort of things starting to grow out, we're starting to see buds appear, makes us feel like, yep, we're in an environment, things are starting to get better for us and stuff like that. And through gardening, we sort of can appreciate that throughout the year there are things that we can look at and think, okay, that's really lovely. And I think when working with mental health groups, one of the main things I would try and impart to people was this idea of what was going on around them, appreciating bulbs coming through, appreciating a frosty morning where we've got sort of dead flower heads and the frost hanging onto them, seeing in summer where we've got sunflowers. So actually people could take that away with them, and on the walks home, they could perhaps look in people's front gardens and see what was changing around them. Also, I think in the country instinctively, we do appreciate nature as well. If we looked at an overhead view of London or other parts of the country, we see that we have areas given over to parks, to greenness, to flowers, to nature. And we see also a new interest or new developed interest in biodiversity, of allowing things to grow wild, letting insects, bugs and stuff come in so they can sort of be part of our lives. And we can see that nature is around us, and nature actually generally finds a way to survive as well, doesn't it? Which is next slide. So this is the 5 ways to well-being developed by the NHS, and I'm sort of just showing this because it generally falls very much in line with the benefits that Thrive had. We can see that connecting is important, and that might be connecting with others. So that idea of sort of reaching out, connecting with others in your life, but connecting as well with nature as well. And this idea that through nurturing there is a connection with us and the plants we work with, that we are helping them, and if we do well by the plants, hopefully they will do well by us. This idea of the physical activity seen in being active, and sometimes that will just be perhaps taking yourself out for a short walk around a garden space, or maybe just sort of absent-mindedly just weeding plants while sitting outside. But that encouragement, perhaps, go outside and be just slightly active outside in nature. We can see that learning there of what's going on in nature, learning about bees, learning about different plant types, learning about ways of growing, learning about what we can do in our garden, and there's a sort of endless array of learning we can do within space and around others we work with as well. This idea of giving, which, as I said, having crop swaps, giving to nature itself in ways of watering, of dividing plants, of looking after, of nurturing plants around us, as well as giving to other people we know the plants that we've grown, and paying attention. Sometimes if you see a bank of lavender and just looking within it and seeing just how many bees are there in those flowers buzzing around, sometimes really sort of taking time to look at a sunflower and seeing that Fibonacci sequence in the seeds, understanding that each one of those seeds is actually a flower that will draw bees to it, and the fact that the stalk itself changes over the course of the day. So the sunflower rotates to follow the sun, so that means that sort of that sunflower head is heated up better to attract bees to it. And so we can sort of start to see what's happening around us, and again appreciate the idea that we are in some ways quite small amongst what is going on. Someone who likes to simplify things, I put this slide up because it shows us that it's holistic. So all these things are happening at once. So we've got the natural environment provided for us, the social environment, and that activity and occupation, which again, doesn't have to be a huge amount of activity. So I was thinking about perhaps, the example I've got is if somebody has issues with manual dexterity, perhaps a stroke survivor who has trouble using their hands, an occupational therapist might well recommend perhaps squeezing a squash ball. That's a good way of sort of being able to work up strength in their hands. They can carry it around with them. They can still see people and stuff, and still work towards improving their hand muscles. But what we might do in gardening instead is perhaps do deadheading. So we can find a bank of cosmos. Someone can cognitively think about which plants they need to prune. They can work alongside others. They can be out in nature, and they can still be through either squeezing a pair of scissors or secateurs, sort of see that strength developing in their hand. So we can see that activity, the social environment and the natural environment all there for somebody as well through gardening, and all at the same time. So we're getting a range of different benefits all at once. Quick theory here, we've got the biophilia effect, is the theory that explains why nature is so therapeutic, and it's about the fact that we have been in nature all our lives, so we are actually intrinsically connected to nature. So I believe that someone came up with the idea that if we look at our time on Earth being a whole week, we spent from, say, Monday to Sunday about lunchtime being very much in nature, being quite nomadic. As around Sunday lunchtime, we actually started using nature. We had the agricultural revolution, where we actually started, instead of wandering the earth, sort of stood in one place and started using crops and such to our own benefit. And then I think it's around about 10 o'clock on Sunday evening, we start to move away from nature and work and live in buildings and such like that, which is where we are now. So we're starting to see actually that we do have this very much a connection to nature naturally, and moving away from nature isn't really that good for us. But this idea of greenness making us feel relaxed, particularly for us, because it means there's water around. It means that we have sort of a natural instinct to survival, and nature helps us realize that. And again, the attention restoration theory, which allows us to see nature as being good for restoring mental fatigue, or has a restorative effect for us. So just by being in nature, you can get a sense of being away. So we can sort of, for me, if I think about my office in Reading, I've got a sort of desk with a computer, but I can walk 200 meters away and be in a field, or be in a garden where I can sort of find a bench and just be able to focus on small plants, on passion flowers and stuff like that, and take my mind entirely away from what is going on. So we can sort of, this idea of being away is just finding a space that makes you feel like you're away from the issues that might be occurring within your life. This extent of these small things that we can focus on. I don't know if any of you are aware of, one of my favorite things is with snowdrops, lifting up the flowers and seeing the sort of intricate patterns within the flowers themselves, or just taking time again to sort of appreciate the smell, bees and lavender and such like that, or just what nature has of interest at all times. And soft fascination, the way we might, when we come across lavender, involuntarily draw our hand out, run our hands across and smell the lavender on our hands, again sort of has that idea of compatibility that sort of draws us to this idea that we all have things that are compatible within nature to us. I have the thing where if I smell tomatoes on the vine, it takes me straight back to being in my granddad's glass house. So that's it's a very evocative effect of taking me somewhere else. I think in Thrive we talk a lot also about therapeutically beneficial plants. Lavender, as I mentioned a couple of times, is a really good one. But perhaps we could think about the dandelion as one. And perhaps, if we think of dandelion with the seed heads and blowing the seed heads off the clock, that would immediately take us back to our childhoods doing that. Or even things like certain weeds we recognize from our childhood, brambles, playing and stuff like that. But these plants are important to help us connect to our childhoods and past experiences as well, which I'm sure we all share as well. And I hope by the end of the call we can sort of share some of them together as well. Lovely. And then the idea of bringing nature indoors. So what I'm going to do now is do a bit of a demonstration, if that's okay. So when we're doing that, I want to think a little bit about the benefits of the activities we're doing, the physical, the cognitive, and sort of think about the steps made to do these activities, what we need, but also sometimes how we can just really break them down and simplify them, and sometimes realizing that we don't need to have multiple trips to the garden centre. We can use yogurt pots with holes punched in the bottom instead of pots occasionally. We can use sort of takeaway trays and stuff like that. We can use old bottles to water instead of fancy watering cans and such like that. And this emotional benefit as well. So think about how it makes us feel when we undertake these activities. So if you just bear with me while I try and set up my computer. Has it made sense to everyone so far? Perfect, thank you very much. Hold up.
We have a few questions. Should we come to these at the end?
We can maybe take a question now, couldn't we, while I set up? I'll try and set up and take a question at the same time. That's multitasking.
Okay, perfect. So we've got one from Avril who said, I'm going to create a vegetable garden. I have a compost bin, but there's not enough there. Which compost would be the best to buy?
Oh, for a vegetable garden, which vegetables are we growing? Because I think certain things like carrots don't need so many nutrients, but I certainly at this time of year lay down so just general multi-purpose does the job. Maybe a bit of manure in there as well is quite nice. That's got a lot of nutrients in there. So yeah, some reasonable. But if you have a compost bin with leaf mold and stuff like that, you can also use that, or a wormery. So your homemade compost. I think I generally put my coffee grounds in my compost. And apparently worms really like eggshells as well as eggshells are meant to deter slugs and snails. Is that enough, Avril? I might have gone a bit over on that one.
Thanks. We've also got one from Ramesh who says, do you have a solution for getting rid of horsetail or mare's tail from his allotment?
Ramesh, you're in luck. Or at least this is what I've heard recently. So I was on a call the other day and we talked about horsetail, which, if you think about benefits, if there's any plant that looks like it came from the dinosaur period, it's that one, I reckon, isn't it? If there's any plant that makes you sort of think, my golly, this used to be on the earth thousands of years ago, it's mare's tail. But you're right, it's an absolute bully. My boss has it and he's absolutely beside himself how to get rid of it. Somebody recommended, but I haven't tried it myself, mint. Apparently if you plant mint, it can start to sort of, it sort of overgrows horsetail and can beat it. But it's a very hard plant to get rid of. And I think the roots do go down some way. Where is it? Is it in your allotment, Ramesh?
Allotment.
It might be a case of, if the mint doesn't work, you could also try perhaps just dividing your beds up. So lose a third of your allotment, perhaps cover it over for a year and a half, and see if that does any good as well.
And we just have another one. We've got one from Alison who's just said, how do you propagate trees from seeds?
Propagate trees from seeds? You can often find lots of seedlings growing underneath trees, so that can work. Or You can go online and get whips where you get the sort of young trees and they can be delivered to you. But otherwise, it's a case of sort of going out and sort of seeing jacaranda. I'm afraid I don't know what that one is, Alison. But yeah, it's a case of sort of going around and seeing what's growing around your in the soil around your tree. And there might be some natural seedlings there. Otherwise, looking online for particular seeds and such. That's and sort of finding out where it comes from. Yeah, lots of trees are very happy to sort of seed themselves, aren't they?
Great.
That's okay, Alison.
Got
I
a
hope
few
that helps.
more questions, but should we go to those at the
I'll do
end?
a quick demonstration. We'll break it up with demonstrations because I think this is a
Okay,
good
perfect.
demonstration. But
Yeah,
bear
we'll
with
come
me,
back to
okay?
the questions.
So this is a potting on exercise. So I have here my time there. I'm going to show you the Thrive method of potting on. So what I'm going to do is take pot, yep. So we're going to think, yep, as you can see, we've got roots coming out the bottom of this time. So we want to really sort of pot it on so we can help it thrive in the future. So I'm going to take some compost, just generally all-purpose compost, stick it on the bottom. Oh, the other thing I need for this is another empty pot, the same size as the first pot. Okay, so I put the compost in there. I then put enough so that when I put that pot in, it comes up level with the edge of the pot there. It's going to stick a little bit more and just give it a bit more height. So that middle pot now level very comfortably there. I then take more compost and spread it around the edges, like so. It can be reasonably messy because it doesn't matter if it goes into the central pot. That's all fine. There we go. And then taking out from there, placing that around the edges there. Lovely, give it a tap. Now take that central pot out, take your plant, remove it from this pot, and then place that in there. And you see, you've got a nice way of potting on that results in your plant having a nice, comfortable new home. A bit of a tidy up there, and using my bottle top waterer, just watering that in there. That should be very comfortable. Yeah, quite a good way of potting on. So generally what I see as being the Thrive method of potting on there. Any questions? I can take the next question, I reckon, Mary.
Okay, great. Thanks for the demo. I'm going to remember that one.
I think lots of people do find that quite useful. I thought I'd share it.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, so we've got another one from Alison. How do you get rid of ivy? She's saying it feels like a losing battle.
Yeah, it is. So previously I've known people to get rid of ivy growing on trees or just cut it and it will die back eventually. So it's just finding the main stem and cutting it where you can reach it, and it will eventually lose grip on the tree. If it's in the grass, that's quite hard. You're therefore sort of looking at, sort of mowing it or keeping it down that way. It's a very pernicious weed, ivy, in many a bed. You have done a big cutback to keeping on it as well, or sometimes in my case, sort of allowing it to grow, if that makes sense. So I've got fences where I do allow the ivy to grow up the fences in places. I think it is good for bees. It's one of the last flowers that bees have in the autumn. But certainly if there is, you don't want it, that would be an issue, and it is quite a lot of work to get rid of it.
We've got another one from Julia who said,
Yes.
can I grow potatoes in a pot? How big a pot should I use?
You can certainly grow potatoes in a bag if that helps. One of the things we used to do at Thrive is using old compost bags. We would take the sort of cut the top. Once we'd use the bag, roll it down to the bottom, put some compost in the bottom of the bag, place potatoes or potatoes in it, and then just gently mound up the bag, rolling up the top as we went. If that makes sense. Wait a sec. I'll just go and get a demonstration. So here I have compost bag, compost in the bottom. So you can, yeah, put potatoes in the bottom there, and then as they start to grow and develop shoots and the leaves start to come out, you keep mounding up the potatoes and then pulling up the top of the bag and then sort of filling up with more compost until you've got a bag full of compost and potatoes. The other nice thing is to harvest, you just put this bag in a wheelbarrow, cut open the bag, and then start rummaging for potatoes. Secondhand compost, yes, that should be fine. It's in a bag, so it shouldn't develop weeds or anything like that. So that would work. If you're doing a pot, yeah. The other thing you can do is tires. That's less likely, sorry, but that's when we did a school project where we got lots of old tires and stacked them up and so put potatoes in them and filled with compost. But I'd recommend the bag's probably the easier version of that.
Great, thanks. And we've got another question. It's another how to get rid of.
Yes.
How can you get rid of ground elder?
Wow, we've really got the pernicious weeds, haven't we? Like we're not holding back. Ground elder again is an absolute bully. Sometimes you can get a variegated ground elder, which is quite nice, but that's not what you're asking. It really does involve taking ground elder as well. It's horrible because it grows into your plants, doesn't it? So it grows right in between roots of plants that are established. So it's a case of sometimes digging plants up, removing as much of the ground elder root as you can. But certainly I remember as a maintenance gardener, ground elder being a real stickler. If it gets into geraniums, it's quite tricky. So yeah, without chemical means, it's just staying vigilant or sometimes learning to live with it in some places. I know that doesn't help, but yeah, that would be my advice. Or finding a good ground cover that might just about keep it down, like periwinkle perhaps.
Thanks, Mark. And another back to the horsetail
Yes.
from Ramesh. He said that he's heard that some people say using a spade can encourage growth, and he was wondering if there's any truth in that.
Using a spade as in to dig it out.
To dig, yeah, in the soil. So digging the earth.
Horsetail is just, it's very pernicious. It really does come back quite a lot. Yes, thank you, Tammy. Or sorry, Tommy. Yeah, I think horsetail is incredibly sort of pernicious. It really does come back. As I said, the whole dinosaur thing is you can see how it has lived through the ages. It doesn't want to die back at all. I imagine, yeah, if you do cut it, it might be like many plants that thinks, right, this is my chance, and just sort of regrows with more vitality from that cut. So yeah, it's a tough one, horsetail. I think particularly if you have it under mypex or something, it could sort of grow through small holes. And so yeah, it's really hard to get the roots out. But yeah, I'm trying not to go for chemical means as well.
Thanks, Mark. I think that was all of the questions people have put in the chat so far. Have I missed anyone's question? Feel free to pop it in the chat again or come off mute.
There'll be a few nice comments as well. Tommy, I think you're right. You do get to eat what you grow, don't you? Eat your produce. And nothing tastes quite as good as a newly grown potato or peas freshly podded. Particularly if you've done it yourself.
Yeah, a few nice comments in the chat. Other people feeling sympathy over having ivy. Celia also has experienced ivy growing everywhere.
And I think ivy also, if it grows on walls as well, it can take out the pointing, can't it? It's really sort of bad to have it on your house walls and such.
We've from the presentation a bit earlier, people just posting about a few things they've noticed. So the smell of lavender, a giant bee hanging out by Maz's washing. So yeah, different observations people have of nature and things you were mentioning earlier.
Lovely. I've discovered minor bees recently. They're the bees that live underground. So we've
Oh
got
wow.
my gardens, and they sort of, yeah, they've got little tunnels under the ground, so you can sort of have, yeah, bees just living. Sorry, and I think it's just like 36 different varieties of bees we have in the country.
Wow.
Nice. So yeah, lovely. I'm going to do another demonstration if that's okay with everyone.
Great. Thank you.
Earlier, sort of thinking about what to do this time of year. I went and looked, and I saw my raspberry was looking. So I went and took some cuttings from that, and again, I was sort of doing a quick demonstration of how you can grow on raspberry. So for this one, I'm going to use a mix of compost, and I'm also going to mix a little bit of perlite in there, which is good for drainage. So it means that your raspberry has less chance of rotting. There you go. What I should have said is I recommend doing this outside because you get quite a lot of dust from the perlite, but that's too late now. So you see that mix. Sort of, I think there's no chemicals in there, but it's good for, yeah, water drainage as well. So perlite does hold some water without causing rot to the roots. I'm then going to put a small pot in there as well. Press that down a bit. Then go about filling the edges up I did last time. The reason I'm doing this is because I want to form a sort of small bed which the raspberry cuttings can sit in. And so instead of the roots like growing into each other, this way I can place them at equidistant around here. And it sort of also direct the roots more downwards than having them sort of just in one pot. There we go. We're just using that. Again, doesn't have to be perfectly done. We just want to make sure it's reasonably tapped down so we get rid of any large air pockets as well. So yeah, create more drainage. We got that. And then cuttings again can be one of those things that can be quite daunting, can't they? So I think the few rules, what I generally like is the pencil rule, which is have your cuttings look a little bit like a pencil. So using this, I'm going to take my pencil. We want to look at the nodes, which now this time of year are quite obvious. So for the first, we're going to cut just below a node there. I'm then going to look at the distance in comparison to a pencil. I can see a nice node there. So I'm going to cut that at an angle. The reason we do that, not too close to the node, is so that if we put this outside, water will run off and not rot it that way. And then that simply gets placed in our compost there, just giving a quick tap to make sure it's nice and securely in. We can then do that with a few more. So again, using a pencil, cutting to the bottom there, finding that top one, and making an incision there. And what's amazing about this is it generally works, doesn't it? My first sort of growing experience was having a house share in Brixton, where we had a drain that ran from the kitchen out into the back garden. And I found that we were actually growing things in the drain outside, which turned out to be tomatoes, which sort of let me know that actually just, through having seeds, having contact with the soil, these plants generally want to grow. And we can sort of learn from our mistakes and such, but there is still a lot of opportunity for different growing methods and growing different things. There we go. I'm just going to do one more. As you said, I can share these with other people. So if I did have a neighbor who did have a fig, I could sort of, give them some raspberry plants in the future as well. And that goes in there. So by placing that outside, we'd hopefully see in a few months' time a bit of result from that. We've got to be slightly careful of frost, so I might keep it so closer to the house. So if we do have a slightly colder evening or morning, it won't be too damaged by frost. But yeah, a nice way of growing different plants. And the last thing I want to do actually before I forget, is just stick in a label and potentially spell raspberry wrong. But we can sort of see how we can sort of grow plants from just what we have around us, can't we? Which is a nice thing. And this time of year, as I was talking very earlier, we can sort of look out into the garden and see potential of what's happening and sort of things we can actually get for free, which is quite a nice thing as well sometimes, without having to take a trip to the garden centre. So looking around the house as well, I've got a money plant just here. And again, that's a quite nice idea of just having a little rummage around the leaves. You can see there a little baby one that I could, if I wanted to, just get a house fork or a sort of small wooden fork from a cutlery drawer without telling my partner, and just sort of gently ease that out and repot that as well. So we can sort of find lots of things we can start to be involved with. Strawberries as well are a really nice one as well. If you've got a strawberry, just chasing, just sort of following those runners, which are stems, and you can see like different strawberry plants growing, and having a bit of, so you can sort of take them out, cut them off the runners, and sort of put them in little pots as well. So yeah, just hope there's some little ideas you can think about there. But again, I'm sure lots of you are very aware of these sort of techniques. Lovely. Any other questions? Oh, slugs. I'm going to say bear trap. Celia? Slugs are a tricky one. I never like killing slugs. But yeah, bear trap, eggshells, coffee grounds are a number of things. They're quite a hard one. Putting strawberries in little jars, perhaps. Or sometimes what a nice one is when you've got slugs, having something like nasturtium, so a sacrificial plant. So a nasturtium will draw slugs to it, hopefully more than strawberries would. So that sort of soft leaf nasturtium does seem to be something that attracts slugs rather than the prized fruit you've grown. Oh, Vaseline around the pot. Thank you, V. And this is the thing, isn't it? Gardening starts conversations, doesn't it? Lots of people have different things. Yeah. Squirrels apparently shiny things. I don't know if people have CDs anymore, but apparently we used to break CDs up and put them in the pots. The squirrels are the bane of our lives when it came to bulbs. They very happily wreck an entire planting session. Squirrels, and so get involved. But they are quite cute, so.
We've got a question from Lizzie, who's also said the session's been brilliant. For the potato method, do you need holes in the bag, in the base of the bag for drainage?
It might be an idea to put a few in there, yeah, just for safety's sake. I think they normally come with sort of some perforations in the bottom, but yes, that's a very good idea, Lizzie. I'd cut a few holes in the bottom just to make sure. Potatoes are one of those things that have a huge urge to grow, aren't they? I don't know if anyone else in lockdown saw those images of people who had left potatoes in the back of their cupboards, and they're sort of quite like the triffids growing all over those spaces.
Thank you.
You're very welcome.
Julia said she's filled bottles of water around the plants to keep animals off, potentially because of the reflections.
Oh, so yeah, reflections is a good one, isn't it? Thank you for back. Yeah, I think we've also had the again working with sort of people with learning disabilities and such. Just those little fans and stuff are really nice. Those children's fans you can get from pound shops.
And another question that this might be for the group in general. It's quite specific, but does anyone know of a pot swap in Cheshire? So if anyone else from the group is from Cheshire, that might be for you. But if not,
look at Social Farms and Gardens website. They have a good community garden, or they have a good link to community gardens. So they have a map that shows different community gardens in different sites. And so if you look at socialfarmsandgardens.com, they might be able to offer some advice.
Got another one from Ramesh who's asked, how do you prevent birds or pigeons from eating slug pellets?
Oh, yeah, I think slug pellets are tricky. What we try and do is there's the cotton wool ones. You can get the bigger cotton wool ones. So don't use the pellets themselves, but use the more natural, organic ones. Would be my recommendation on that, Ramesh. I hope that helps. Or as I said, have different plants such as nasturtium, or have a beer trap perhaps as well to try and deter slugs away from your prized plants. And so yeah, the birds wouldn't be able to eat perhaps.
Great, thank you.
That's good. I've really enjoyed the feedback from the group as well, and the things that I've learned as well. Like filled up water bottles is a nice one for reflection, isn't it?
Yeah, lots of different things that you wouldn't think of straight away.
And I think that's the thing. We're always learning like these handy tips. There's always something to learn, and I think that's one of the joys of my job is learning these different methodologies and how people work. And I think culturally as well, just people have different ideas of plants to grow and things, which is always surprising. It's nice to see.
Yeah, definitely.
A lot to explore.
Does anyone have any more questions or advice though?
Dandelions between terrace tiles. Oh, let's see now. You can get brushes. So there are brushes. So for a natural way, salt and brushes as well, which you can get from most garden centres. So they've got steel wire brushes, which you can sort of scratch the dandelions out that way. Or just salt. You can also get weed killer that comes in almost like a deodorant can type of affair, where you can just sort of therefore do each dandelion separately as well. Or if you want to get really tough on it, when I was last at the garden centre, they had a flamethrower sort of weeder. So that's again organic method of doing it. Or you can just use so there are a few ideas there. Flamethrower might not be top of your list, I do understand that. Yeah, salt and sort of chemicals, but as you say, salt's a good one, especially if you've got it in your house, and just mix that with some water. Oh no, sorry.
Okay, that might be it for the questions.
So just because I'm not advocating flamethrower that much, particularly if be careful out there.
A few nice comments in the chat, just general feedback from people who've enjoyed the session. But yeah, if there are no more questions, was there anything else you wanted to cover, Mark?
If there is, I've forgotten. I think I hope you enjoyed. I hope if you do want gardening advice, please check out the Get Gardening website. Please do contact us if we can help in any way whatsoever. And otherwise I think it's that last thing of that gardening being very forgiving. Just have a go at things, try things out and see what you can develop, even if it is just a small plant where you have some bulbs appear and a small lavender that grows over the summer and stuff. But I hope you do take the time to enjoy your garden space when you can.